What's up, guys? It's Uncle Freedom coming to you on another glorious and well-deserved day off, kinda. I go to work tonight. But today, we're going to answer some questions that came up during me talking about go and no-go handgun ammunition, and that is considerations for bullets themselves. So guys, if that sounds like fun, you want to nerd out with me, go ahead and like, subscribe, tell a friend, because what we're doing is fun. We are growing. It's been fantastic, and I owe you all a thank you for that. I also started the Instagram page. For those of you that didn't know, it is at Uncle Freedom 213. It is at Uncle Freedom 213. If you leave me a comment or it's something pressing and you need an actual answer to it and you don't want to risk me not seeing the comment, go ahead and shoot me a private message over there and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And with that, we'll get going. So one of the things I talked about in the video is speed versus penetration versus did it perform through barriers? Did it do this? Did it do that? And a lot of people, you can get really wrapped around the axle about this stuff. And a lot of people didn't understand where I was coming from. Like I would say things like, I like this, but I only like it in a plus P variant. And somebody's like, well, why? It doesn't make any sense. Why would I want to do the wear and tear to my handgun? Most modern handguns, something like a SIG or a Glock or something like that, are made to be fed a pretty steady diet of plus P ammunition and can even get away with some plus P plus, though I would stay away from that because plus P plus is not an actual SAMI spec, which means that there's nobody that set the actual pressure indicators for plus P plus. That is literally a use at your own risk ammunition. Don't do that unless you know your gun can handle it. Glocks are pretty good about it. Berettas can eat plus P plus. The SIG will eat plus P plus. In fact, the SIG, the 320, was originally designed around a diet of NATO ammunition. So that is actually, for those of you that have ever shot 124 grain 9mm NATO, that is actually 124 grain plus P. So there you go. Plus P stuff, we're looking at a 124 grain projectile somewhere around 1,200 feet per second. That's kind of the benchmark of what you're shooting for. So when I talk about your bullet considerations for that and why I recommend plus P in a lot of these things, we look at something as simple as a 147 grain jacketed hollow point for 9mm. That could be something like this guy, which is the Hornady XTP 147 grain jacketed hollow point, or a Winchester 147 grain jacketed hollow point. This is actually a Winchester white box bullet. And in case you're wondering, yes, you can buy those. They come in a box like this. So when I tell you I test things, I don't just test them at factory velocities. I go hot rod shit and see if it works. But something to keep in mind with 147 grain that you look at also with 45 ACP is lead antimony. Antimony is the lead alloy that makes up the inside core of your bullet, and how that is structured, whether it's harder on the Brenner hardness scale, if it's softer, those things come into play of does your bullet perform at lower velocities. You have to think, when you shoot a 9mm 147 grain, that's heavy for caliber, and you can get those that come out in the 900 feet per second range sometimes. Something to be cautious of with that is, the slower you push a jacketed hollow point, the closer you are to something known as expansion threshold. Expansion threshold means once you cross it, that bullet will no longer reliably expand the way it was designed to. Now, that's important because the way hollow points are designed, you have a lead open core and then you have skiving on the outside and the inside of the jacket. And what that is designed to do is, as it hits a fluid media, hydraulic pressure hits the inside of the cone and forces it to peel back, creating the expansion we see, and, opening up pretty things like, the talons on the Ranger T's or what have you. Or exposing the pretty gold dot in the center of a gold dot. That's the name. But the slower you push that round, the less likely you are to actually get that expansion. You may get suboptimal expansion. You may not expand enough. You may not. There's a lot of things that go into there. That's why if I shoot 147 grain, unless the bullet was specifically designed around being shot slower, I'm going to opt for a higher velocity in 147 grain, or unless the bullet was specifically designed to expand at lower velocities. You look at something like Hornady's Sub-X line for the 300 Blackout. That's a 208 grain projectile that is purposely designed to expand at the 800 foot per second threshold, which means that even out of a 9-inch barrel, which doesn't really matter on 300 Blackout, and you fire it, it's going to expand the way it's supposed to because of the lead antimony and the way the core is designed. That said, you can get yourself into trouble with that If you take a bullet that is designed to expand at a lower velocity threshold and then you hot rod the shit out of it, and then it peels apart, basically. That is one of the pitfalls to this bullet. The Hornady XTP 147 grain jacketed hollow point. Extreme terminal performance. If you didn't know, that's what that means. This bullet is designed around expansion in that 900 foot per second world. It will optimally expand and penetrate in its designed area. However, you can push these faster. I've gotten them well over 1,100 feet per second out of a handgun and well over 1,200 and something feet per second out of a same handgun. I will tell you that once I created loads that were above 1,200 feet per second, I started suffering bullet failure because the lead core was never designed to be hot rodded that fast. What would happen is it would enter into the gel, and the speed that it hit the gel and would actually peel the petals back so fast it would shear them off and it left just a core. That can be a problem, but that is a bullet construction consideration we have to look at when we go faster. Now, most of your standard stuff, think Gold Dot, HST, damn it, come on now. Some of the other bonded offerings and stuff, they are designed specifically around the fact that they are meant to control the expansion, much the way a soft point bullet would do if we were using a hunting rifle. Those bullets are designed to expand at a predetermined rate once it hits media, meaning you don't run the risk of shearing things off and having an over penetration or not penetrating far enough or not doing the damage you thought, not retaining weight. These are all things we have to look at, and that is something that is very important when it comes to handgun ammunition. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what anybody tells you, handguns put holes in things. These are not one-shot fight stoppers unless you really drill something important. And another thing to keep in mind when you talk about handgun ammunition is it's not necessarily an instantaneous stop unless you hit T-box, credit card up top. What you're suffering, what you see people go down from, a lot of times they get shot in the arm and they hit the ground right away. That's a psychological stop. That is their brain registering they've been shot, something's wrong, and then freaking the fuck out because they've been shot. That is a lot different than you punching a hole in the T-box and then lights are out. Okay, that's a true physiological stop. Like, that is gone. Psychological stops are not the same thing, and you will see guys that suffer a psychological stop, they hit the ground, then they get up and start fighting again. That's why. That said, handguns are not the most efficient thing in the world at stopping a threat. They're just not. We carry them because they're convenient and they do work with proper shot placement, bullet selection, and penetration. When we start talking about that, though, it takes a long time to leak enough fluid for a hydraulic system to completely seize up and shut down. And that, make no mistake, that is what we're doing with handgun ammunition. Even if you hit the heart directly, are they going to come back from it? No, it's a fatal shot, but it's going to take a minute. That's one of those things we look at with body armor, right? Your body armor is not made to come down to your belt. You can get shot in the stomach, it's going to suck, and you're probably going to die from it, but not right now. You have enough time to finish the fight, versus if you get shot right here in the heart, you might only have 10 to 20 seconds to win, which could be protecting your family in that situation. I would take not dying here, dying in 30 minutes here, and winning the fight. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about bullet construction considerations. That lead antimony is so important, because if you have a super soft lead and you have a hot rodded bullet, you're going to overexpand. I mean, just flatten out, expand. And what's going to happen is you're not going to penetrate. But if you have something that's designed with a bonded core and it's super heavy, and then you hot rod the shit out of that, well, you're going to get good expansion. You're going to get the expansion it's designed to do with decent and good penetration, hitting vital stuff and stopping the fight. Or you take something that's super hard lead antimony that's supposed to be hot rodded fast, and then you take that same projectile and put it in a 2.5-inch barrel, and it doesn't get fast enough to do what it's supposed to do. It's not going to expand. It's not going to open up the way it's supposed to. And you have to think everything that happens between your bullet leaving the barrel and actually impacting on a hydro media, such as a barrier, heavy clothing, things of that nature, those are going to slow your bullet down. And your bullet's slowing down the second it leaves the barrel anyway. So the deck is already stacked against your bullet doing what it's supposed to do. So I always err on that. If I'm going to shoot something, I want something that is higher velocity because I know I'm going to get expansion, but I also know that usually when we're talking higher velocities, we're talking about a bullet designed to withstand that in a bonded projectile. The next one's going to be your jacket thickness. Not as much of a big deal on handgun ammunition, but a huge deal in rifle ammunition, which we'll cover in the next video. The jacket thickness is how thin that copper jacketing is as it goes up top. That is going to be able to control your expansion too. It functions that way. If you have a very thick jacket, it's going to take more pressure to peel that back, hence more velocity. If you have a very thin jacket projectile, think a varmint bullet, a very lightweight projectile, you're going to be looking more along the lines of something that expands incredibly fast, like the critical defense round. That bullet is designed heavy clothing, bare gel. It expands very fast, limiting its penetration and all but eliminating your risk of over penetration. And that is done through jacket thickness, lead antimony, and the velocities that it is designed to run at. All of these things come together to create an effective projectile or defensive round. The next one we're going to talk about is your hollow point design. There are a ton of hollow point designs. If we want to talk about the original self-defense hollow point design, if you will, this is a wad cutter designed to be shot out of 38s. People would load these guys backwards because they're hollow based and you had this big wide projectile. They didn't necessarily do what they were supposed to do because they're not skived or designed to open up in the manner that a hollow point is. But if we look at things in the way things have changed, something like, let's see here. Here's an OG, right? This is the OG 147 grain. And next to it is a much wider hollow point and the SIG V-Crown bullet made by Sierra. Wider open hollow points, the flying ashtray, if you will, from the old 45 ACP days in Supervel. What you're talking about is a wider surface area that connects with the hydromedia, forcing the expansion, making it more reliable, expanding, but it can limit your penetration unless the bullet design was designed to control how fast it expands based around the velocity. Your next one we're going to look at is your solid copper. Solid copper has taken off a lot recently, and there are a lot of options when you talk about solid copper bullets. Probably the most prevalent and famous one right now is this guy. This is a Lehigh Extreme Defender. This is a 90 grain projectile. Now, if I were to put that up base to base with another 90 grain projectile, that's a big difference in length. And that's because copper is not as dense and it's not as heavy as lead. So that enables me to have a slightly larger projectile, which has better density when it impacts material, and I can push it really fast because it doesn't suffer from the same problems that a lead bullet will. It doesn't deform under pressure. You can't start leaking if you've ever hand-loaded and hot-rodded a rifle around too far and you've seen a trail come out behind your bullet right before it completely dematerialized in midair. That happens. You can overstabilize and the bullet explodes. Get to that in rifle. It's kind of fun. But when we start talking about a solid copper, there's no threshold for how fast I push these. And solid copper bullets are designed to expand pretty much, period. That said, a solid copper hollow point can run into issues if you go too slow. Solid copper stuff's designed to be run hot, period. That's one of the reasons I love the Extreme Defender bullet, because the Extreme Defender bullet, I can hot rod the shit out of it. It's going to just perform better the faster I push it, but it still performs at lower velocities as well. I also don't have to worry about things with a solid copper, something like this, with barrier performance. Which brings us into barrier performance. I talk about this a lot in the go handgun stuff. The reason it's important may not be important to you. Food for thought. I'm law enforcement. I need my bullets to go through things. I need them to function, hold together, and do what they're supposed to do once they hit the target behind whatever the hell I shot through. That's important to me. It may not be important to you. Things like critical defense exist simply because your average, everyday concerned citizen has no need to shoot through auto glass to hit a threat. Because how in the hell are we going to articulate the fact that you shot through auto glass at somebody? Think about that. I get it. And the thing is, even if you're in your car and you shoot out of your car, the next question is going to be, why didn't you stomp on your gas? I know, summer of love and understanding, peace and cooperation there. Yeah, I felt bad for anybody living in bigger cities. I really did. But when we talk about barrier performance, the barriers get increasingly harder. Sheetrock, plywood do damage to bullets, mainly by clogging the bullet itself with foreign matter, and it prevents it from filling with the fluid once it hits a torso or a target and expanding the way it's supposed to through hydraulic pressure. But then you get into things like sheet metal and glass. Glass will completely destroy your bullet, and sheet metal can bend the tips in, and once it starts bending and deforming the end of your hollow point, it no longer reliably expands the way it's supposed to. It's just physics. You threw something at 1,200 feet per second through metal, and you wanted it to do its job exactly the same on the end. You have to design for that. And that brings us into kind of some of the people that did design for that. One of the things you're going to see with a barrier round almost all of the time is something known as bonded versus non-bonded. A non-bonded hollow point, a great example of the pitfalls of a non-bonded hollow point, and there are literally ammo tests everywhere in jail to look at it, is the original Golden Saber by Remington. I don't give a shit what you shot it through. Once it hit gel, the core came out and the jacket went over here. Like, your core and your jacket separate. Is that a huge deal? It can be, because your jacket is actually sharp. That's what's doing more lacerations, and you cause death from a pistol if you don't hit something super serious from blood loss. You have to make the system lose enough fluid that the hydraulic pump seizes. And those pedals actually are sharp as shit, and they will cut things up, and that's what they do. That's also the wider expanded part of it, because once the jacket's gone and the core has no support, any lead that flowed out to create your hollow, that flower design you look, will just shear off, because there's no support for the lead itself. Lead is soft. So that's where the bonded stuff comes in. Things like your gold dot. Your gold dot is a chemically bonded bullet. That means that in a molecular level, atom by atom, the actual jacket is bonded and fused to the lead core itself, meaning that under anything, when it hits glass, anything like that, the bullet doesn't come apart. But the issue I've run into with gold dots in the past is they can be super subject to velocity. So if I'm shooting 147 grain gold dot and I'm not pushing it high enough because I'm shooting a smaller gun with it, I might not get the intended result I want. I might get straight line penetration. I might not get any expansion. But if I take a 124 grain jacket at hollow point at plus V velocities and I shoot it out of a 3.5 inch barrel, I'm probably going to do what I'm supposed to do, even through some barriers. Another great example when we look at that bonded stuff here is this guy. So this is a 135 grain critical duty projectile. These are incredibly hard to get. You're not going to be able to go buy them. Just can't. I'm special. My mom said I was special. Anyway, so we're looking at this guy. There's that cool flex lock tip we see there, which prevents things like sheetrock and plywood and clothing from actually clogging this up. What it does is this stuff is super soft and squishy, and as it impacts and plugs it in, the plug will push it back out some and allow the hydro material to get in the inside, compressing it and forcing the expansion. That's what you're looking for with those little flex lock tips. You will also notice on this guy is I have a cantilure and then I have a crimp ring down here at the bottom. That is not a second crimping ring or cantilure. That's an interlock. So what happens on Hornady's bullets is the way the lead jacket is drawn up, it hooks like this on the inside where you see that groove. And when they actually swage the lead core into it, it actually locks itself mechanically. The lead is mechanically locked to that copper. And unless you shear the entire jacket off, it ain't coming apart. And I've never seen one shear the entire jacket off. But that's a bonded bullet, which is one of the reasons that this bullet will outperform. We'll look at another Hornady bullet. Where we go? There we go. So if I take these two bullets side by side, bottom is 135 grain, top is 147 grain XTP. That 147 grain XTP will fail through barriers far more frequently than that 135 grain will. And I threw that down on the ground. And one of the reasons being is barrier rounds are bonded to actually survive impact with intermediate barriers and continue on. Now, then we talk about the weird, different ammos out there. Your RIP, your Guard Dog, your Starfire, your Civil Defense. They all have some weird Achilles heel to them. They really do. Your civil defense is moving super fast, and while it will go through soft armor, it comes apart. When it hits things, it immediately dematerializes and frags. The problem is it didn't have the velocity behind it or the narrower profile that like a varmint round would, so it doesn't penetrate as well. I've heard guys have shot hogs and done all this stuff. That's great. The problem is it doesn't change the fact that if I shoot through plywood, there's no bullet really left to go through this. And in a handgun round, penetration is what you're shooting for because you don't carry enough energy and velocity to do massive amounts of damage through shock. Another one I mentioned is the guard dog. So this is the guard dog, right? This is a 105 grain Federal expanding full metal jacket. Sounds cool, right? Looks kind of neat. Ooh, sexy. This is what the expanded projectile looks like. That's an expanded 105 grain Federal guard dog. That blue stuff you see is polymer. So what you actually have is inside of this tip, you have polymer inside of it. And when it impacts a material, it begins to smush this guy, forcing the polymer to leak out and expand the projectile. That's cool. One problem. Anything I hit before I hit that target starts the expansion, which means even if I'm pushing it hot, and this is a long projectile, if we're honest. So this is 105 grain, and here's 90 grain. Like, this is a compressed bullet, man, and the 90, it's still taller than the 90 grain. What we're talking about, though, is super heavy clothing. If a guy has on, like, Carhartts and a Carhartt bib, you're going to start that expansion before you ever get to the target. Which means, while you may penetrate, you're going to lose penetration. It's not a matter of opinion at that point. You've created a wider object trying to enter a hydraulic cavity. It's not going to go as deep. It can't. Also, it sheds its energy really fast when it impacts on things because it's flattening the bullet, making it less aerodynamic and stripping away speed every time it does it. That said, it could work. Would I trust it? No, not for me. I've never seen it fail to expand because it's always going to expand. It also, I've seen it hit the jail literally completely expanded because it expanded on sheetrock and punched a hole that big through sheetrock and then just like went in the gel like that freaking deep, and it was just a big chunk cavity that deep. That's not deep enough to get anywhere, so it doesn't really do what you want it to do. So guys, there we go. Initial look at bullet considerations for handgun, and this goes across the board. This isn't just a 9mm problem. If you are shooting a 45 ACP with a bullet that is not designed to expand at 800 feet per second, you're not going to get optimal expansion and terminal performance. It's not a matter of how you feel about it, because again, facts don't care about your feelings. It has to do everything with just physics and engineering at that point. So something to keep in mind, it applies to every single bullet made. If you don't push it to its optimal velocity window, it's not going to expand. If you fall below that expansion threshold, it's not going to do what you want it to at all. And if you have a bullet that's not designed to go through things before it hits things, it's probably going to suck when it does hit things. There are some exceptions to the rule. Some things work better than others because there is no exact science. That's something people get wrapped around the axle about in this world, is there's no exact science. There's a shitload of engineering that goes into making these, and I will tell you the objective behind what I do and everybody else that tests ballistics on the planet is not to find the round that never fails, because that's not really a thing. This is as close as I've ever seen to a round that never fails, and it's because of the way it's designed, and it doesn't rely on anything else that normal bullets rely on to do its job right. All you got to do is hit what you're aiming at. But that's a rarity. The normal rule, that's the exception. The rule of this is we're hunting the bullet that fails the least often, because every bullet will fail. I could take a barrier protocol and shoot the exact same protocol with the exact same rounds out of the exact same gun from the same box of ammo, and I could do it 4 times in a row, and I will fail a test I just passed, because that's how it works. You cannot control what a bullet does when it hits something. They can engineer it and try to make it better, but the end goal for you as an end user, concerned citizen, defensively minded, good red-blooded American, is to make sure you carry the option that fails the least. That's the most efficient, the most effective on paper in the amount of tests done. Because Tuesday to Friday, the 12:01 a.m., whatever you want to call it, you could fire that round that's been a flawless performer and something weird happens. Maybe you clipped the guy's Zippo in his shirt pocket before it impacted, and critical defense has never failed in that realm, but now you've clipped this and it screwed up the hollow point design just enough that it didn't do what it was supposed to. Things like that happen, man. This is a weird game we play with ballistics. Find the one that fails the least. The information I provide out here, all of my testing I've done, is not to tell you, this is stone cold, this is the best there is. It's my opinion, because everybody, Paul Harrell, doesn't matter who you are, we are subjectively offering you an opinion on what we've seen compared to what we've seen from everybody else. I'm more data-minded. I like numbers, things on paper that I can compare to each other. And that gives me an answer for what fails the least. I have the benefit of being able to talk to other ammo companies, though, and figure out what they've seen on their end, or just go look and watch them shoot the test myself. It is what it is. So, something to keep in mind, guys. Again, this game is all about finding what works the best for you in your specific situation and the threat that you perceive and will fail the least often in that realm, okay? Remember, there's nothing 100% when you start shooting bullets. You're just looking for the fails the least often, the most consistent version you can get. So, guys, there we go. Some bullet considerations. We've talked about lead antimony, your velocity considerations in relation to that, bonded versus non-bonded, how you're looking for penetration, what influences those things, what solid copper means to a bullet, weird bullet designs like the guard dog, and how your jacket thickness actually plays a role into the expansion and the way it controls its expansion through a target. So guys, I am Uncle Freedom. A little bit longer video today. I hope you guys enjoyed nerding out with me today. And stay tuned, because the rifle ammo version is wild. Because there are a lot more considerations when we start talking about things going 3,000 feet per second. And it's going to be fun. So guys, Uncle Freedom. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll see you soon.